The following episode was originally recorded for a private podcast as part of the Equipped for Life course. It has been edited for public release, but may reference training material from the Equipped for Life course. So this is interesting. We have Missy Stone from Students for Life here, and it was 365 days ago we were recording Module 9 for the Equipped for Life course.
Yes.
That's kind of weird, right?
It is weird. I think we're establishing a tradition that I spend February 17th.
You need to come here every February 17th.
Yes. Yes.
So for those of you who don't know, maybe you haven't watched Module 9, because we have a lot of people listen to the podcast before they watch all the course videos. So if you haven't seen Module 9 yet, Missy Stone is the National Field Director for Students for Life of America. Students for Life and ERI work together all the time. And what Missy does there is, I think, one of the hardest jobs is she runs all the regional coordinators. And we love the regional coordinators, but she runs them. She handles all that, makes sure they're all being effective and kind of communicating back and forth with them and helping them to help their clubs. So I was thinking it would be kind of fun, and I just pulled this up today. We've never released any of the bloopers from the course, but we were thinking maybe we could play some of the bloopers from Module 9.
Oh, gosh.
And I have them on my iPad.
This is going to be great. It's gonna be awesome.
And go.
Let me introduce you to a couple of my friends. This is Jacob Nels. He's our outreach coordinator at Justice for All. He is one of my...
Justice for All?
Oh my gosh. That's really bad.
I caught it in my mouth. It was everything and I'll just break the glass.
Jacob used to work for Justice for All.
Trading you for Missy.
Better sleep with one eye open.
Oh my gosh. All right. How are Jacob's hands?
They haven't moved.
So pause it.
They're actually super good.
We were struggling when we were getting set up with what should everyone do with their hands, because there's this little table and we didn't want like hands in like awkward positions.
Right.
And so we ended up like actually figuring, okay, you have your hands here, you have your hands here. We wanted Jacob and Josh to not have their hands in the same place. And poor Jacob is just like frozen the entire time with his hands just in that one spot. It's really funny.
It's just hard to know what to do in these situations because you don't want to come across...
It feels so much more awkward.
Yes.
It was really awkward with that little glass table. Like I was expecting a big table for us to sit around, and then we had this tiny little glass thing.
Yes.
Like it's so much smaller than what it looks on camera.
But do it like more conversational. It's like, yeah, this is a video that,
That's going to be the hard part for me because I'm so used to not having conversations. It's just, like, talking.
Don't say that.
No. I mean, like on camera. Like I'm just like it's just like talking points. Okay.
I hear you.
See, we all stink at this, right?
Yeah,
It's really hard.
Context. It's context, you guys.
It's hard to speak into a camera when you're not used to it.
Yes,
Right?
that's what I was trying to say. Oh, man.
It is very hard. Good memories.
I was at the University of Oklahoma.
Kansas.
You know, the university doesn't matter. It's the story.
Why am I catching all the problems here?
I don't know.
Like, I'm the only one that was like, hey.
You're the only one with media training. I don't know.
This
All
is
right.
great. It's a great story.
It is.
Thank you. It's not as like moving as yours, but yeah, I'm like over here crying listening to your story.
Good. So let's talk about sharing resources with people who are abortion-minded and post-abortive. So let's talk about sharing So let's talk...
All mine.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. What is that?
The internets.
Yeah, the internets. Come with me. We'll find something, that Al Gore invented, and we'll find the reason.
Let's go back a sentence. Yeah, what was that? This is.
Can I just start it?
You've got one job.
Can I just start?
prompts.
You guys are all rambling. I have to memorize everything.
Sorry. I'm really bad at that. I have no idea what I just said. I don't ever want to
You've got a story.
I don't want to ever follow him. I'm like, your stories are so much better than mine. Gosh.
He's really good.
He is
You
really
can't
good.
have him. He's all mine. Good thinking.
And we'll get
And you've got a story about this, right?
amazing story. You think the stories you've heard are amazing. This one's
I want to like
this
go
is
home
the
and
best
cry.
Is this Georgia State?
State, yeah.
Oh, I didn't think this was that good of a story. Okay.
It is a good story. Oh my gosh.
It's
All
not as
right.
good as the Africa story, but it's really good.
Africa story.
It's just funny.
No one's life was saved.
Well, it was that they were at risk.
That's true.
Anyway, he was on a safari. Charged by an elephant. Literally.
Oh my gosh.
If you go on a safari, it happens though. So they make it happen.
You sound very adventurous, like falling from rocks and being
He
charged
fell
by
off a
elephants.
cliff
There's
40
a
feet. Yeah.
adventurous and there's stupid, and I cross that line along.
Okay. Okay.
That's really helpful. And that actually brings us really well,
Naturally.
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 Nothing wrong with naturally. You know, you throw it to who?
We used to do Who's On First.
How old were we when we first did Who's On First together?
So it was
Like
Hope
10 and
Chapel.
11, 10 and 12 or something maybe?
I would have been, what, 6? No, that's not right.
I feel like
I was 11 when I joined the worship team. I think there's after I joined the worship team. Sorry, I was probably like 11 or 12, and then you would have been like 10
9
or
or so.
10 or something like that. We did Who's On First at like 4 or 5 talent shows or something like that. We were really good at it way back in the day. I don't know what reason there would be for us to learn it again, but
I think there is no reason.
I think that's probably right. It was fun back in the day.
Yeah.
So I orientated myself so I can talk to these high school students while I
You oriented yourself.
Orientated.
orientation.
Orient-
Not
oriented.
orientated.
I oriented.
Oriented.
I orient. They just said their goodbyes.
In Jacob's defense, it is so difficult sometimes when you're on camera and like you get caught on words and
Yeah.
it just
Yes.
doesn't come out well.
Yep.
It
Yes.
seems obvious, of course. We've said the word oriented a million times,
Yep.
but it's a lot harder.
Well,
when
you're
there's a
thinking
camera
about
on
so
you.
many things. It's not
Yeah.
just the words, it's how you're sitting and where are your hands and, you know, all these things. And it's just not as natural. And so you say things like orientated.
Yep, that's what happens.
It's like
There's too many people around here that need an ambulance. I don't understand.
it's California.
You should open the door and just look outside.
Make sure everything's
Don't
okay.
open the door when it's a zombie apocalypse.
Smoke coming from all over the place.
Yesterday, earthquake. Today, zombie apocalypse.
You know, sometimes you can be a little, I don't know, what's it?
Subtle?
Subtle, yeah, I'll say sneaky. I don't really want to say sneaky.
It sounds to me like you've been through something, like a door shutting in the background.
Anyway,
Oh, man, that's so
Good
good.
times.
There are actual tears in my eyes right now from laughing.
so I'm gonna put a slightly longer version of that, but like the video of us in there on the podcast page if you want to see that. There were just a few of these that were so visual, it didn't work to do just the audio in that. So this is like the shorter clip. I'll do a slightly extended version in video on the
That was
on the
awesome.
page, and maybe one day we'll do something with all the other bloopers from those 3 days
Maybe.
of
I
shooting.
have been asking Phil to do something because he has so much B-roll from all the videos that we've done, and there is some gold in there from Kristen, from me, from Brent, from everybody. And I'm like, Phil, I just need a blooper reel. Like, we need something. But
Yeah. It's really fun. It just takes so long.
it takes
to
so
put
long, which is why he
together.
hasn't done it yet. But I'm like, you have so much good content.
Well, I'm really glad that you were with us a year ago on February 17th to record that module. I was really happy with the way it came out.
Awesome.
That 30 minutes of finished video from a 2-hour shoot or whatever it was.
I think it was
Sitting
more,
there.
maybe.
And Tim, just right behind the cameras, always watching where are our hands and what should we be saying and trying to track it.
No, don't do that.
To be fair, so in that set of bloopers, Missy was the one correcting people. I was correcting people all the time in the
Yes,
actual
I feel
shoot.
like that misrepresents what was actually happening.
For whatever reason, these were the clips that Tim pulled aside for me when he was doing the initial edit.
It was the
of
ones
all
that were
that.
funny.
Yeah, that's true. We were just let's just throw away the ones that aren't very funny.
Oh,
There's a lot of funny ones from the other few days though.
So good.
Someday,
One
maybe.
day I'll do something with all that.
I'm so glad that you did that. That was amazing.
It's good to see you again.
Yeah.
Let's get into our topic. So Missy and I were talking, a week or two before the conferences, and then everything was insane for a while, and then things have a little bit calmed down. But we were talking about one of the things, or a few of the things that Students for Life clubs have been getting kind of hit with a lot from for the pro-choice students on campus. And so we figured, hey, this is a podcast where we talk a lot about how students can respond to the things that pro-choice people say. And right now, there's a few things that the Students for Life clubs have been hearing a lot. The RCs have been telling Missy. This has been coming up a lot, and figured, well, let's talk about those things. And it's this interesting thing where it's also something I've been seeing a lot lately on Facebook. And it's been kind of an annoying experience, but it's basically.
Are you triggered, Josh?
What on Facebook is not an annoying experience?
I know.
Is the better question.
Why am I?
People are going to get the impression that we just are completely anti-Facebook, and we're just mostly
We're not.
anti-Facebook.
Right. I'm not doing a lot of debates with people on Facebook. I'm getting annoyed inside and not really saying anything because I don't want to deal with it. And that's when someone will say some pro-life comment, and then another pro-life person comes in and says, well, I'm not just anti-abortion. I'm pro-life. And what pro-life means is I am pro-consistent life, or I'm a consistent life pro-lifer, because not only am I pro-life about abortion, but I am pro-life about war, I'm pro-life about the death penalty, I'm pro-life about how we should treat the planet, I'm pro-life about animals, I'm vegan, like there's all these different things. So I'm truly pro-life, and kind of the implication here is then, like, if you only care about abortion, you're not pro-life, you're
anti-abortion.
You're just anti-abortion. And that's it causes complicated feelings for me, because there's a sense where I do think we should care about all these other things.
Yeah.
In fact, it would be easy for me to expect that even maybe some students would have taken the stuff that we've talked about a lot in the last couple of years about fetus tunnel vision and sort of even gone too far. Like it would make sense to me that someone would be like, oh man, I totally agree with Josh and Tim about the fetus tunnel vision thing. And so I'm going to care about everything. And now I'm a true pro-lifer, or like that kind of thing.
Going on the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, like I don't think just because you care, like I think everyone should care about these things. I think you should care about torture. I think you should care about how we treat animals in factory farms, things like that. I'm not convinced that means that every pro-life person has to be fighting all of those things equally, and that's what I feel like a lot of pro-choice people are implying when they're like, oh, you only care about abortion, that like that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's meant to be a stab. Like it's meant to be something that is negative against pro-life students. Like if you only care about abortion, then something is wrong.
Yeah.
And I think it's really easy to fall into this trap of being guilt tripped. Like, oh, I need to be focusing on all of these other things if I want to prove that I'm really pro-life.
See, even like as soon as I hear that phrase from the pro-choice person, I feel like there's clarification needed. Like if the phrase is "you only care about abortion," what do you mean? Are we talking about someone who legit has fetus tunnel vision and they actually only care about abortion?
Right.
And in that case, I've got a problem, and let's talk about that. Or when they say you only care about abortion, is what they mean is the only like social evil that you fight is abortion.
Right.
The only thing you do activism about
Right.
is abortion. I think usually they mean that second thing.
Yes, and there's a balance that we have to find, because obviously we don't want to come across with fetus tunnel vision. We don't want to downplay other injustices. We don't want to make other people feel like the cause that they are involved in is irrelevant or, not worth our time. But at the same time, if we focus on so many things and allow ourselves to fall into trying to prove that we care about so many things, and are we at risk of watering down our message?
Yeah. So let me push you. This is going to be kind of a where do you draw the line question. Mm-hmm. In one of the course videos, and I don't have this verbatim, but Josh said something about how if people don't trust your moral compass, if they think that your moral compass is broken, then they're not going to be able to take your moral views seriously. So how do we draw the line here? Where on one hand, we've got to not only literally care about abortion, but also it seems like we can't do exactly equal work on every topic.
Right.
So how do you hold those things in tension?
I think the distinction is you can be personally consistent life or whole life, whatever phrase you want to use.
Right.
You can build credibility with groups by saying, which I've done on campus when they've asked me about different injustices like the death penalty or even being a vegetarian, things like that. Like, what do I, and I can build credibility with them saying like, well, this is how I actually feel about that. But it's not an effective strategy for your group.
For like a group to spend equal time fighting all these different things.
Right. So like just basic marketing. If you're talking about everything,
you're sort of talking about nothing.
You're talking about
Sun
nothing.
Tzu, Art of War, he who attacks everywhere attacks nowhere kind of
right.
thing.
So I think the distinction is, personally, I can have these feelings about abortion, about the death penalty, about poverty, and in my personal life, my husband and I take steps that we feel convicted to take to answer those questions.
Right.
But as far as my messaging as a anti-abortion advocate and, what we're telling the students to do, there is strength in being focused. And we do tell groups, like, you can take on maybe one or two other things. But so if you want to be the Students for Life group that is anti-abortion and anti-death penalty, we have groups that do that.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so like they can pick other injustices they want to talk about, but we just say keep it to 2, maybe 3 at the most, because at that point we don't want to get away from talking about abortion because we're so distracted by everything else.
That's interesting. So this is completely new information for me. Okay, so a group. so I'm curious.
Yeah.
A group that is fighting 2 or 3 things.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have some kind of a rough estimation of the difference in the quality of the outreaches or what those clubs get done versus the clubs that focus on one thing? Are the clubs, maybe a nicer question is are there clubs that are able to pull off doing 2 or 3 things and still end up having really good output, basically?
Being totally honest,
Yeah.
I maybe have seen it done well 2 or 3 times.
It's harder.
It's a lot harder, but these are more active groups that have 30 plus members that are legacy clubs that have been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think once you've established yourself and you've built up a good reputation on campus and you've laid all that groundwork, you can maybe start branching out a little bit. But I think when you're first starting out, that's where we see a lot of groups really struggle, because they start out and they're trying to take on so many things and so many issues, and which in each issue we need to do a flyering campaign, an event, and a speaker, and you're spreading yourself too thin, and you don't get those easy wins, or you don't make any headway, I guess.
So it's like so one of the clubs that's applied for a scholarship for the course, we just gave them a scholarship, was the group at Berkeley. And I'm looking at their application, and the club has existed for like 20 years.
Right.
And they do weekly outreaches. They could probably pull off every once in a while doing an outreach on a different topic or asking kind of a different question, and it brings in this kind of freshness or like that kind of thing. Whereas a club that's just started and no one understands who they are, they haven't built up good rapport by doing all the different things that they're going to do.
Yeah. Another group that's done it really well, as much as it pains me to say it as an Auburn fan, is the University of Alabama. But the same thing. The group has been around for a long time, and as far as I can remember, they only really recently started moving in that direction. But they were very established as we are the pro-life group in the sense that we are against abortion, and they were only talking about abortion. But they're very well establised.
I've got kind of a question for you. My guess at like one of the major problems that I would encounter if I were like a Students for Life club leader and wanting to expand beyond abortion is that if dialogue is a priority, like we want the groups to be able to dialogue well, learning to dialogue really well on multiple issues,
things,
like just learning to dialogue well on abortion is a time commitment. Like even if the only preparation that you're doing is like going through the Equip for Life course, there's a lot of time that goes into that.
Right.
And so asking busy college students to spend that kind of time on 6 different issues, or even 2, is asking a lot.
Yes.
That's my major concern. So what I want to ask you is, the groups that have done it well, do they do a lot of dialogue on these different issues, or are they doing chalking? So like if groups are going to chalk on their campus, it's not that hard, I would think, to do effective chalking on multiple issues.
Right.
On even the same day?
On even the same day, sure. It's just you write a message with chalk. That doesn't require like that much background and training. You got to like think about what your message is going to be.
Right.
But that seems like a much easier activity for a group that's trying to tackle multiple issues.
Right. It's purely from a pragmatic standpoint, as we're saying. Strategy and time and practically, you can't fit all this stuff in and be successful. And I can't speak specifically to those groups because I'm not the regional coordinator. I'm not the ones working alongside them on a day-to-day basis. But
I think that's just wisdom. So I got pulled aside by this adult who was at the DC conference, like guy in his 40s or something like that. And he was like, all right, I haven't heard about your group before. I want to ask you some leadership questions or something like that. I forget it was like leadership or corporate or like something like I want to understand about like your strategies. I'm like, okay. And so he just starts saying like, how focused are you? Like what are your focuses? What are the things you do? And I told him, I said, we're really, really focused. There are so many great things going on in the pro-life movements, like lobbying. I don't know anything about lobbying. I don't know whether West Wing or House of Cards is more realistic. I hope West Wing, but I don't know. Whatever. It's probably somewhere in the middle. But like, I'm so glad there's great lobbyists out there. I have no idea how to do that. And pregnancy care centers and like there's all these different things. I said we only focus on training people to do one-on-one conversations because I think that's the thing that we're the best at. And we're only going to focus on that. There's a couple different things that we do in that, but that's all we focus on. And we talked about that for like 15 minutes. And then he left and he's like, okay, I feel good. I think you guys are going to do really great. Like that kind of thing.
Thank you so much for your confidence.
Like, you should be donating right now. Anyway, so but I think that's just common wisdom is you got to figure out, okay, why are we here? There are so many things that you talked about myself in the third person, that Tim and me and Jacob could do if we wanted to. There are lots of different types of things that we can do. And there's even things that we've been tempted to dabble in that would be like, it's just like not the most valuable use of our time. I think it's the same thing with the club. Your time is such a valuable resource. Use it wisely. Right.
And we've said too, there are groups that are already tackling sexual assault, race relations, and so let them do that well. Because if you get away from your message about abortion, then who else is talking about it? And that's the big danger, is that if you take on so many issues, are you going to stop talking about abortion? And no one else on your campus is talking about abortion, but other people might be talking about the other injustices because they're a more popular thing to talk about. Right. You know, that it's not as controversial to be against sex trafficking or, want racial equality. That's especially on college campuses. That's pretty common. So if you are the pro-life, anti-abortion person and you stop talking about abortion, then there's a hole. There's a gap that desperately needs to be filled, and that's what we're trying to avoid.
So I want to make sure that your position, Missy, is really clear. So I'm going to feed back to you what I hear you saying, and then you correct anything that I get wrong.
Okay.
What I hear you saying is it's really, really good for every pro-life student or every pro-life person. Like, this is pro-life movement too. It's not just about students for life, but like it's good for every pro-life person to not have fetus tunnel vision, meaning we don't want pro-life people only caring about abortion. Pro-life people should care about lots and lots of different things, maybe to varying degrees. Maybe God calls them to care a lot about a couple of issues, and that's fine. But we don't want them to have fetus tunnel vision. But you would not advise like groups of people, like formal groups of people, whether it's a Students for Life club or a Pro-Life Future club or whatever other club of pro-lifers get together and do things, a 40 Days for Life group, to focus on like, hey, let's do activism together against 4 or 5 different things. You're saying pick the thing that you're going to fight actively and do that really, really well. And then meanwhile, care about those other things. You're going to make life choices differently, whether it's not buying meat anymore or whatever. You're still going to live differently, but you're not literally doing activism against a different thing every week.
Correct. I mean, and to make it really plain, if the 40 Days for Life campaigns took on multiple issues, imagine trying to take the same community and do 40 Days for Life, 40 days of prayer and fasting in front of the abortion facility, in front of the meat processing plant, in front of Walmart.
they will get less net impact done
Right.
if they're trying to divide their forces like that.
Right.
It's something I was thinking about when we were talking a few weeks ago. Like I think sometimes pro-life people will like maybe unintentionally make decisions that aren't like the wisest for like what their group's going to spend time on. But I think that's like these are really well-meaning pro-life people.
Oh,
just like they care about all
absolutely.
these things and let's fight all these different things. I'm a fighter. I'm an activist. I think a lot of times what's going on with pro-choice people is far more manipulative. And
Yes.
it's like because they want to get you off track. And I was thinking like, how great would it be if we could convince all of the Planned Parenthood like clinic escorts, like those people with the orange vests to stand out and make sure the sidewalk counselors have a hard time talking to people. Like, how great would it be if we could convince all those people that go there every week that they should be fighting 5 issues at the same time? Like, hey, you should maybe be at Planned Parenthood once a month, and then on your other weeks you should go do you know some kind of protest about Black Lives Matter or something like that, and then sometime else go do something with PETA, and then this time go do like whatever, like you know go be mad about
Planned
whatever
Parenthood
war
suffers if we succeed at dividing their focus.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And I think they want that to happen with us.
Whether or not it's conscious, like I don't think the average student that's coming up and questioning is thinking, oh, I'm going to tell them they need to care about other issues because I want them to be unsuccessful. But I think deep down that is really what's happening. Like we are playing into their hand if we stop talking about abortion. That's exactly what they want us to do.
Yeah.
So when we take on all these other issues and we're talking about different injustices and not talking about abortion, then they've essentially succeeded in silencing us.
I think a lot of students really just care about consistency, and it's like totally
That's totally
like
fair.
non like sneaky or anything, and they're trying to figure out, okay, are we consistent with our beliefs?
Yeah.
There's a certain kind of credibility there. That I understand.
Absolutely.
I disagree with the conclusion that you have to be fighting all things equally in order to be legitimately pro-life, but like that's one thing. But then there is also the issue of you've got people on the other side who they're using it as a kind of a weapon.
Yes.
Like they're trying to cut you down with a totally unfair argument.
Right.
So my question is, do you have a different way that you would respond on campus if you like particularly think, okay, I think this person is actually like weaponizing this concern, or would you respond basically the same way?
I don't know if I would respond differently. I think maybe my tone of voice might be different. But it's essentially going to be the
You'd
same.
really try to not have your tone of voice be very different.
Yeah, but it's essentially just going to be the same. Like, you don't know what I do in my personal life. Like, you are making an assumption about me that I don't care about other issues, which I frankly find offensive. We get a lot of emails, so all the info emails come to us, and so we get this often. And one of the main things people say is we're not compassionate because we don't care about those other things. And my initial gut reaction is, how do you know that I'm not compassionate? How do you know that I don't care about these things? Obviously, I say this a little more lovingly, but it's like, you don't know what my family does for the foster care system in our county and what my husband and I do to combat poverty in different areas. Like, they're making an assumption, and I tell them that, like, you don't know. You don't know what I do. Like, you don't know my life. Like, you don't know. I help them see that they're making an unfair assessment. And I think that works in both situations. Okay. You know, because like the person genuinely asking, I can say like, well, I actually do care about a lot of things, but I care about abortion the most. But I am against insert whatever they were talking about there. And I feel like it's been successful with both kinds of people.
Okay, so let's talk about messaging, because there's multiple directions that you can go with the person who's saying you don't adopt enough kids, or you only care about this, or you don't care about animals or foster kids or whatever. This is like one way to go, is just to say, if you're awesome, if you take care of foster kids and help people in poverty and you do all these different things, it's I think really easy and also natural to say, oh no, let me list all the different things we do, how you're assuming things about me, you should feel kind of bad about that. Now, I have heard one pro-life leader that I'm not going to name just because I don't want it to be about that person, like that's not the point, but let's talk about the argument is that pro-life people should like basically never respond that way, because it's sort of like allowing them to have done this ad hominem attack and kind of treat it like it's legitimate. For this person, the answer should be, it doesn't matter. Let's just say, I hate kids. I'm never going to adopt kids, and I hate animals, and like all these different things. Like that has nothing to do with my position against abortion. Fight against my pro-life argument.
So I was actually going to push back against Missy in a very similar way, which was...
I have thoughts on this.
Okay. Would you respond the same if someone walked up to you and said, you're a racist? Like that's their first words to you ever. Would you respond by listing off how many black friends you have?
No. So when I'm on campus and I'm having really good dialogue with people, the number one response I've gotten is that you've changed the way that I view the pro-life movement. And I think sowing these seeds that pro-lifers do care about other things directly combats the stereotype.
Yes.
And it is helpful.
Yes.
So
certainly it's good to combat that stereotype.
So I can understand what you're saying. Like
what the other person's saying, I didn't say.
They are totally, that's totally legitimate. And I get that, but at the same time, I do feel like it builds credibility with people, and it makes me more of a person to them. You know,
it humanizes you. So
yes.
should it be a both and instead of an either or? Should you say, okay, well, I happen to do a whole lot of
I happen
those
to really
different
care about
things.
this stuff.
I don't think that has anything to do with the argument I just made against abortion. It kind of feels like you're not answering that. You're just focusing on me. That doesn't seem like the best way. Like, is there kind of a both and approach that is better? Because I agree exactly with what you're saying, which is that, of course, we want to help people understand what the pro-life movement, is, and not the caricature that's in their head.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think if you just do one, then there's a potential problem.
Because with the one saying it doesn't matter, you have the potential to come across not compassionate.
Yeah.
Whereas, again, with the other answer, you have the potential to fall into their trap.
Yeah,
And
the other approach comes across very debate-y.
I feel like my answer for everything is there's a balance. There's always a balance.
Okay, but so I want to ask Tim about something, though, because Tim and I have talked about specifically how to respond when people come up and just immediately are accusing us of being a racist. And Tim's approach with that is a little bit different. So you want to talk a little bit about...
My inclination when someone starts off by being really aggressive is to not play the game that they want me to play. And this is something that I'm still kind of field testing. So my confidence level is like 60% as opposed to usually it's closer to 75. It's rarely higher than that.
You'd never know.
I'm surprised it's as high as 60 then.
Would be just to say, wow, that's a really terrible thing that you just said. You don't even know me. Like you owe me an apology. Like that was a vile, nasty thing. It's a vile, nasty thing to walk up to someone and just assume that you know something, to know that they're so nasty and evil and vile as that. You owe me an apology. I'd be happy to talk with you, but what we're not going to do is you're going to call me a racist, and then I'm going to take seriously that seriously as an argument and say, no, I'm not a racist. I like everyone equally. Like I'm not playing that. Like that's a terrible thing that you just did. My impulse when I do outreach is to really heavily err on the side of like being really compassionate and relational and gracious, and I don't want to be like, I'm just so offended, I don't even want to talk to you. Like that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about is like a very like I'm trying to rescue the conversation. And honestly, I think this is a better way to rescue the conversation than to like cower and tuck your tail between your legs and be like, oh no, let's have an argument about whether or not I'm a racist. Like that's the kind of conversational setting that I don't see as being productive. Yeah. It might last longer because if you respond by this, say like that was a terrible thing that you just said. You don't even know me. You owe me an apology. Like let's have a real conversation. That might result in them walking away in a huff, and now the conversation's even shorter.
But now you can move on to a real conversation.
I would rather have that happen than to spend 10 minutes trying to convince them that I'm not a racist. That's just a huge waste of my time. And if they respond positively, like if you get in people's faces in like a appropriate way, so I'm link to the "Don't be too nice" piece for examples of this. then that can like really have the conversation turn out well, because people will meet the standard of etiquette that you're expecting of them.
I think I need to clarify what
Sure.
what I'm envisioning in my head with my response, because I think you guys are thinking I'm going to be nicer than I am.
I never think that.
Yeah.
No, I was kidding.
My answer would be something like, I do care about those things, and here are maybe one or two, like very short, like here are ways that I show that I care about those things, but that's not why I'm here, and getting it right back on track. Like
So you do the both and thing.
Right. So I still think it's important to add that small answer just to say, hey, not all pro-lifers are the stereotype, but that's not why we're here. And there's a reason that I care about abortion the most. Like, you can accuse me of that, because I will take that all day. I do care about abortion more than anything else, and here's why.
Right.
So I wouldn't let it derail the conversation for 10 or 15 minutes. I would say what I need to say and go, but there is a caveat to this. I do care about abortion the most, and that's why I've dedicated my life to ending it. So I don't think that response of explaining yourself needs to be a cowering thing. It can be clear and concise and get right back on to the conversation.
That's good.
So I want to talk about labels a little bit, because I've specifically seen multiple Facebook posts, I feel like in the last month, like a lot of pro-life leaders are talking about this and not all agreeing about like how pro-life people should use the label pro-life. And some people are clearly trying to kind of push the movement. Hey guys, let's all agree that pro-life just means anti-abortion, and only use it that way. Kind of stop using the consistent life language or whole life language or whatever to mean pro. Like, when you say pro-life, don't mean all those other things, just mean this one thing. And I see other people kind of pushing the movement towards, hey, you can talk about being anti-abortion, but when you talk about pro-life, we mean lots of things. Like, so you've got opposing messages being sent to the pro-life movement right now about specifically this label.
This is one of the things that we're running into, and I think it's something that a common issue that students are running into also, is what on earth does the word pro-life mean?
Right.
And I think that's why at Students for Life especially, we're moving away from using that language, because it's gotten so broad and everyone is defining it differently.
Yeah. It kind of opens you up to criticism.
Right. Instead of just saying we are anti-abortion.
Yeah.
Like, that is a very clear thing. And if you look back on different social movements, it's always an I'm anti-drunk driving. I'm anti-smoking. I'm anti-slavery. And so those were all successful campaign. So it's not actually a bad thing to be considered anti-whatever. So we're moving away from the pro-life language because it's become so confusing. What on earth does that mean? The word pro-life has just become so big and open for interpretation. Let's just be clear. What are we? We are against abortion, and that is a unifying factor, and it's okay to be labeled that way. I think some people take that as a insult, and I don't. I'm happy to label myself that way. Like, I am anti-abortion.
Well, I think I want to try to find some in between. So I've honestly struggled with whether or not I want to just ditch the word pro-life completely for the last year or two. And I think that the thing that's made it the hardest for me is not like the other issues. I'll get back to that. I think there's a difference between merely being anti-abortion and being supportive of life. So a couple years ago, there was a situation with some friends of mine that I'm not going to name right now, who they came into contact with a young woman who was really seriously considering an abortion, and they went to such incredible lengths to save this child and to help this family. Yeah. It was incredible. They drove her to every appointment. They gave her a car, or at least lent her a car for a long period of time, and took this family. They adopted this family. Yeah. And it was really, really a beautiful thing to watch. And that's really what pro-life means to me, kind of a thing that I'm not quite ready to let go of. But I find Missy's argument very persuasive, and so she might get me. She might get me.
Oh, I feel so accomplished right now.
Because the level of confusion to say pro-life, I think it spreads chum in the water. And so, like, okay, here come the sharks. Oh, pro-life. There's a weakness. There's a weakness that we can go for. We can try to distract.
Who are the sharks in this analogy?
People that want to hassle pro-lifers.
Okay. And
so I'm tempted to go that road. What I believe very strongly is that we should not be using consistent life language. Absolutely not.
Not even people who believe kind of what that phrase means.
They should not say that. So I'm a generally politically conservative person. Mm-hmm. I believe in small government. I don't believe like people who like have nothing should be thrown to the wolves. Like that's not what my view. There's some level of safety net that's totally reasonable. But I'm a small government guy. I don't believe in nationalized healthcare. I'm also a just war theory guy. I'm against the death penalty for pragmatic reasons. I don't want to execute innocent people, and I'm concerned about that mistake happening. But I'm not against it for principled reasons. I don't think that I'm inconsistent life for believing that it's wrong to murder an innocent baby and it's not wrong to execute a murderer. You can think that I'm wrong, and like we could have an argument at this table about whether I'm wrong, but I'm absolutely not inconsistent.
Yeah.
And the consistent life language is I don't believe this is like the actual intent. And like there's like people that I love who use this language. But it is a wedge that is perfectly set to divide the pro-life movement.
Yes.
And we do not need more division.
Right.
If you say, I'm consistent life because I'm against the death penalty, then you're saying to everyone else who's for the death penalty, you're not consistent life. As opposed to using language of we disagree, you're wrong, let me persuade you. Which is the language that like some of our students like a couple of years ago used, and they pushed, and they actually convinced me against the death, or partially they convinced me against the death penalty for this pragmatic side. But I still totally disagree with their principled arguments.
Right.
And if you use language like you're an inconsistent person, that's a divisive move. Like let's argue about who's right. But like whatever your view is, it's not inconsistent to believe it's wrong to murder a baby and not wrong to execute a murderer. Whatever your view is on war, whether you're a pacifist or you believe that some wars can be just, you can believe either thing and still be consistent and have a coherent worldview against abortion.
Yeah.
And so the consistent life language is totally divisive. You can be anti-death penalty and a vegan and pacifist and like whatever else. I don't care. That's fine. We could argue about all of those issues. But if you use language like you're not consistent pro-life, you're asking for problems.
Yeah. Which is one of the big things at Students for Life is that we want to focus on what unifies and not what divides.
Yes.
And so that's why
this is why we almost never talk about abortion images. It's too divisive.
Yes. I call us Switzerland. Like we don't take stances on a lot of things that are divisive because we want to focus on what unifies us. And what we know unifies us is that we're all against abortion. So our groups are so diverse. And that's amazing to me, where some of them do take on different issues or they all have their own DNA. And that's great. But we work with people of all religions, of all walks of life, of all political stances. And all we say is, as long as you're against abortion and you're not advocating violence, you're not breaking the law or participating in non-compassionate outreach, you're in. And we found that as a way of bringing us all together. So we're getting people in the same room that you probably would never get in the same room otherwise.
But that's awesome.
Yeah.
Which is awesome, which is
that.
why I'm okay with the anti-language, with the anti-abortion. We can all get behind that one thing. Yeah. Whether or not you believe it's going to be done incrementally or in a full swoop abolition, or whether or not you think it's, if everyone sees a picture of a abortion victim or not, we can all agree that we're against abortion.
And let's have those discussions like amongst ourselves.
Right.
And let's be respectful and try to persuade each other.
Right.
Like I think just war theory has a lot going for it. And if you're not a just war theorist, I'd love to argue with you. But I'm going to do that respectfully. Yeah. And I'm not going to be like, you're a bad pro-life person if you're a pacifist. Like that's terrible. Yeah. That's such bad strategy.
Right.
One of the greatest, the best things about like the partial birth abortion ban a number of years ago was it divided pro-choice people like crazy.
Yep.
That's good. We want them divided. We want us united. That's good strategy.
Right.
Missy, let me kind of, play devil's advocate here. So you're saying let's not be like distracted about all these other issues. Let's focus on let's be against abortion. Then why should we spend so much of our time talking about Planned Parenthood? Isn't that kind of a side issue? Can't we talk about abortion without talking about Planned Parenthood?
Planned Parenthood is probably my favorite subject. I love talking about Planned Parenthood.
Not talk about my favorite subject.
All right, bring it on.
Okay.
All right. So why should we be focusing on Planned Parenthood also, and not being just laser focused and not divisive?
So one of the things I love about working for Students for Life is we are very strategic, and we look at everything like what is the most strategic way to accomplish what we want to accomplish. And if we want to end abortion and see the culture change, we have to take down the abortion Goliath, which is Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood is the nation's largest abortion provider. They account for 1/3 of all abortions that are committed. They are the abortion lobby. They have all the money. They set the talking points and the marketing. They drive the abortion industry. And so if we want to see abortion end, I think that is strategically important to go after the main component of the abortion industry. And we've seen people's, like, even if we can't change their views on abortion in that moment. So I've had people say, I don't agree with you on abortion yet. We're planting seeds, but we can at least change their minds on Planned Parenthood. We're moving them in a positive direction. But I think it's very important that we're focusing on who is driving this agenda, who is creating this culture. Planned Parenthood has done an amazing job normalizing abortion. They've gotten into the school systems very early, and they talk about abortion like it's very casual and it's a very normal thing. They've created the environment of thinking abortion is just a part of life, and it's totally okay if you're 16 and you get pregnant and you just go to Planned Parenthood. And so we have to directly combat what they are doing to the youth and to our culture if we're going to actually see abortion end. At least that's what I think.
So what you're saying is it's not a side issue.
No.
It's not a distraction. It's a strategic necessity for the end of trying to end abortion.
Yes, because if we can get Planned Parenthood defunded out of our schools, we're crippling the abortion movement. Like, they drive it. They have so much money. They have billions of dollars. Imagine what we could do with billions of dollars. But they do really successful marketing campaigns. Like, there's a reason that people believe the 3% myth of Planned Parenthood, because they've done a phenomenal job brainwashing young people and making abortion very normal. And so that's what we're going up against on campus, is that people have bought into what they've said. They've been victimized by Planned Parenthood, essentially, and so they've created this culture. Yeah. So I think it is so important to talk about abortion and really get to the heart of the issue, but unless we directly target where, like, the root of their industry. I'm not saying the root of the problem. The root of the problem is that we don't value people, but they're huge players.
I think I'd probably be inclined to push back if I didn't think that Planned Parenthood was vulnerable and this wasn't an achievable goal.
Right.
Like, if Planned Parenthood was like so good at covering up their dirty laundry and whatnot that trying to go after them is just like a waste of resources, because they're too effective at what they do. It might be better to focus on the deeper root of trying to convince people to be against abortion. But that they're as vulnerable as they are, and like the undercover videos and everything, what they've been caught doing illegally.
But are they vulnerable because we haven't let up on them? Is this a result of what the pro-life movement has successfully done? Because I would say maybe 10 years ago, they were not vulnerable.
Sure. So that's like in retrospect, we could say the effort of Live Action and Center for Medical Progress and these kinds of things, and Students for Life, this has been successful. I think it could be that if Planned Parenthood was a little smarter and covered their tracks a little better and trained the people to not admit to covering up sex trafficking and statutory rape and that kind of thing, and didn't sell baby parts, then it might be that all of this effort would have been put into trying to take Planned Parenthood down, and it would have deflected off, and they'd be standing strong still. And at this point, they're weak and vulnerable, and their dirty laundry's out in public because this road has been successful. And given that, by all means, keep the pressure on.
Yeah.
So
that's a good strategic move.
Okay, so the people who take our course and listen to this podcast, what we're usually talking about is not as much political strategy as much as like what should you be doing in your one-on-one conversation. So how should this strategy, this idea that for a while the pro-life movement should be putting extra pressure on Planned Parenthood while they're vulnerable, how should that affect people's normal conversations? Are you saying that pro-life people should try to bring in Planned Parenthood in all of their conversations with pro-choice people? Is it that they should talk about both in every conversation, or sometimes only talk about one and sometimes only talk about the other? Like, it should affect our outreach tools? How should people apply what we're talking about here?
So my view is that it certainly, the pro-life movement should be expending resources into taking down Planned Parenthood. I don't think that every individual needs to do that. Planned Parenthood is a weird, frustrating issue in a one-on-one conversation, because some people have the kind of emotional attachment to it that if you go after it, it's like you're insulting their mother, and that's going to cause problems. So I don't believe that every conversation about abortion you should bring up Planned Parenthood. But certainly the pro-life movement as a whole, that's one of the things that we need to primarily do. And so Students for Life is a lot more, Students for Life of America is doing a lot more political strategy than ERI is. ERI is focused on training for dialogue. So I think that's probably why we don't talk that much about Planned Parenthood and Students for Life does. Does that sound fair, Missy?
I think that is totally fair. And as much as I love talking about Planned Parenthood, I think it's right where it doesn't have to be the center of every conversation. However, I know how much you guys love common ground and finding gateways to talk about abortion. And I think something that we've done very successfully is we've used Planned Parenthood as the gateway. And, you know, bringing them, like I said, if we're bringing them up on campus, we're questioning Planned Parenthood's business strategy and their motives. And then what are we ultimately going to start talking about? We're going to start talking about abortion. And so, you know, when we've done displays and things in the past, they've been attracted to us because they want to talk about Planned Parenthood. But then it opens the door to, okay, what is this really about? You guys are out here because you're against abortion. Well, yes, I am. So I've seen it used very successfully in opening those gateways and being creative to draw people in a way that maybe they wouldn't have, you know, come around otherwise. But I've also seen it used in a way to find common ground, like I said earlier. And I've had a lot of people at least say, I'm never going back to Planned Parenthood. Like I had one student say that to me at my alma mater. I was at University of Southern Mississippi doing one of our displays, and we were talking about Planned Parenthood's business. And even though she wouldn't budge on abortion, she said, you know what, I'm never going back to Planned Parenthood because I don't agree with how they treat people. And to me, that's a step in the right direction. At least now, if she finds herself pregnant and scared, hopefully she's going to remember that and not walk into Planned Parenthood and be manipulated into having an abortion. And so I think it can be used strategically, but I don't think it's the crux of every pro-life conversation or anti-abortion conversation you want to have. You don't have to bring up Planned Parenthood, but I think it can be used in a way to move people down that path, down, you know, in their journey of questioning abortion.
So I'm having an interesting biographical experience right now, where I've been very skeptical in the past about encouraging pro-life people to specifically focus on Planned Parenthood in their conversations, because I've seen that not go well. But then Missy has some experiences of it going really well and it being this common ground thing. It might work with some people, but it might actually really harm the conversation with other people. And then it becomes like, is it the best common ground?
Well, you have to remember, too, the students that are doing these displays are doing a lot of other outreach. Like, no group is only talking about Planned Parenthood, because I totally agree with you. And I think that's what's so beautiful about the pro-life movement, is that we have so many different ways to reach people. And you're right, there's some people that are going to be reached with the philosophy and the debates, and that is not my strong point. I'm not a philosopher. It would be wrong to say that every single person is going to only be reached with my one strategy. And I love that we have so many different strategies. I just think people shy away from the Planned Parenthood thing when it's not as bad as they think it's going to be.
Yeah.
It's okay to talk about Planned Parenthood and talk about how they commit over 300,000 abortions a year and how they manipulate women into having abortions and how they don't offer prenatal care. Like, it's okay to do that. It's not something that you necessarily have to.
They don't do freaking mammograms.
They don't do mammograms. Oh my gosh.
Liars.
Let me rephrase what you just said as more of a counter argument to what I just said, and see if you agree with my attempt at you countering.
You're better at articulating what I am saying than I am.
I think what you're trying to say is that presumably you agree that there's at least some people that are not helped by the Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
Okay. So we agree on that. I think I feel like the potential disagreement is how many of those people are there? Like if 50% of pro-choice people are going to be instantly turned off for if you talk about Planned Parenthood, and only 1% of them are going to be like, oh, this is great common ground. We have a really obvious thing there. And then so I think it comes down to like how many pro-choice people are turned off by the plan. And I think, and what I hear you saying is you think not very many people.
Okay, the answer to that, from my experience on campus, the only people that it really becomes an issue with and a wall with are the ones that either volunteer for Planned Parenthood, work there, or have had significant experiences there. So we've had people come up to our displays or talk to us, but they work for Planned Parenthood or they volunteer for Planned Parenthood. Those people, we're not going to get them on Planned Parenthood's corrupt abortion practice, abortion business. But the average person isn't, from my experience, is not that person. But it's the ones that have really bought into Planned Parenthood. They are involved on a much higher level, whether they're volunteering there or they're. I will say, Reagan, our Western Regional Director, had an amazing experience last week with our We Don't Need Planned Parenthood display. She actually convinced a donor of Planned Parenthood to stop giving them money.
That's great.
And they walked away saying they're not going to donate. So, and if you're donating to Planned Parenthood, I would say that you've bought into their organization. Like, you believe in that. But here he is, came up, and now she's changed his mind. So the only people that I've come across with where I've realized we're not going to get anywhere with you are the ones that are personally really tied to the organization. The average college student, they just know the random talking points that Planned Parenthood has spouted.
So I basically think pro-life people should probably do some testing, because I think I don't think we have enough data to have strong views yet. Like, to be fair, I've heard basically the same argument used to defend all kinds of methods and arguments. Someone had a good experience. Like, you should hear this amazing experience that Reagan had, like that kind of thing. Or I had this set of really good experiences, and that's not going to be my main argument. Like, I need more data. But to be fair, I've done almost no data gathering on trying to get people against Planned Parenthood in my conversations with pro-choice people. So I'm open.
You're open.
I'm open.
I consider that a win.
Certainly, we all agree that the pro-life movement should go after Planned Parenthood.
I'm glad that there are people like David B. Wright and Kristen Hawkins and other people who are making strong attacks against Planned Parenthood in this time where they're super vulnerable. I think David Daleiden did a lot of really good work. Yeah. So I'm all for that. I think I'm more trying to figure out what do I think is the best use of this in conversations, and I would just need more data on that.
You do what you do so well. So we all have our things. You do that, and I'll talk about Planned Parenthood.
Okay,
that works.
Agree to disagree.
I thought we were agreeing. What are you talking about? I remain open. Yeah.
That's awesome.